Welcome to episode 290 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with TEG's Tim McGregor to discuss live events in 2020 and what they'll look like in 2021.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who's preparing the next #SportsBizMelb event, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, TJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan. I am actually considering running an in-real-life Sports Biz Melb event. Let me know, because we are now coming out a bit of lockdown here in Melbourne, and we might be able to actually meet up in real life. If you can't do that, as we have listeners all around the world, really do appreciate it. You can find me in the internet, or on the internet. Is it in or on? I'm not sure. I'm in both. At Sean Callanan on most platforms, or you can reach me via email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com, or all things Sports Geek are at sportsgeekhq.com. You can find the podcast, you can find the newsletters, and you can also find the place to RSVP to for Zoom calls. Mentioning that, Sports Biz Zoom calls, now fortnightly. You can book in to catch up with fellow sports business executives by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. A couple of weeks ago, we tackled planning for 2021. How do you put plans in place for 2021 coming out of post-pandemic? This week, we're looking at data and sponsorship. December 8-9, we're looking at developing new revenues in sports. And December 22-23, we're just going to catch up and have a bit of a Christmas party via Zoom. So please go to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. If you have come previously and you haven't been for a little while, I really love it if you'd come back. I want to get a regular cadence with this on a fortnightly basis, but also need to make sure the people are there. Need the people there to make it worthwhile. So if you haven't come back for a while, come back. It's great that you are now busy and more work is coming online. But I think it's also a great way to stay connected with the scene when you can't do things like in real life networking and conferences. So check it out, sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. Before I get into my chat with Tim McGregor from TEG Live, just a quick plug for the Sports Geek Patreon. You can support what we're doing in this space, both in podcasting, hosting Zoom calls, producing the Sports Geek newsletter on a regular basis by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. So as I said before in the last episode, thank you very much. Now Patreon is covering the hosting bills and the podcasting, editing bills, which is great for the last couple of months. Obviously, been doing this for 60 months, so really do appreciate the support. Welcome and thanks to Pete Holderman for signing up as an annual subscriber. You can do so by signing up annually and get a discount. So please check it out, sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. And now I want to get into my chat with Tim McGregor from TEG Live. This podcast has been a year in the making. We were talking about it at last year's MEO, Melbourne Esports Open, and talking about some of the events that they had planning. And guess what? 2020 has been a weird year. I haven't been in Sydney as often as I normally would like to do my podcasts in real life. But this one we did over Zoom. We had some internet issues, but I'm sure my sturdy podcast editor, James, will clean it up in post and it will be a good conversation. So this is my conversation with Tim McGregor from TEG Live. Very happy to welcome Tim McGregor from TEG Live. He's the Managing Director. Welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
It is. First of all, before we get stuck into what's been happening this year and looking ahead in the events industry, I want to sort of look back a little bit to sort of ask how did you get your start into the space you're currently in the events space and in sports in particular, amongst a bunch of things. How did you get your start into the industry?
So yeah, a bit of a journey. I started off running music festivals, the Falls Festival and Offshore Festival back in Victoria in the early 90s. Got started and then wanted to get a real job and went as the in-house legal counsel at the Grand Prix Corporation. We're working on MotoGP and Formula One, and so that was the first kind of involvement in a major sporting promoter, if you like. And from that point on, went work with a number of different promoters, most particularly Paul Dainty, and the Dainty Group, and then when his business was acquired by TEG, into my current role now, which is as managing director of TEG Live. And so we do everything from basketball, netball, esports, ice hockey, college football, soccer, you name it, anything that's big.
Yeah, so from your time in at Grand Prix and starting at Dainty in 2005, like the variety of content has changed quite a bit. Like I'm assuming coming from a Falls Festival background and a tour promoter, it was primarily music first of all around bringing out those big shows, but you've widened that brief.
Yeah, so I mean, I think running music festivals when we were 22-year-olds, we were making up the rules as we went along. It was really interesting going into the Grand Prix Corporation where there were more rules than you could imagine, and so It was quite a different environment. And really, both of them were great to get to cut my teeth as far as promoting is concerned. Back with Paul, the emphasis definitely was on music, but we did do all sorts of sporting promotion events as well. I mean, even things like professional bull riders, which we ran for 4 or 5 years as a partner with the US team. But coming into TEG Live, Jeff Jones had built a very strong sports promotion business over a number of years, which, as I said, had everything from ICC, soccer, into Melbourne to ice hockey, college football. And then we developed esports events off the back of that, working closely with ESL. So it's developed over time. I still have very much the business it's got a very strong music promotion aspect to it, as well as family entertainment and the exhibitions. But the sports promotion part of TEG Live in most years would represent about 50 to 60% of everything we do.
So what was it like, I guess, behind the scenes of TEG as a lot of these either tours were getting postponed and that, the shutdown and I'm in here in Melbourne and there was 110 days of nothing and we're effectively in hard lockdown. What was TEG doing as a business to try to figure out what the next steps are? Were you doing a lot of work on patron safety and strategies to bring them in? What's been the work that you've been doing in the meantime?
Yeah, so we have done a lot of work with what's called the Live Entertainment Industry Forum to develop, I guess, a set of guidelines that industry practitioners, venues, promoters, others can deploy in order to operate, safely in a COVID world. And so part of that is to give our sort of industry confidence that's possible, but also to government, to the public health authorities, that there's a really good set of plans that are in place for when we can actually get started again. I mean, I think, when I guess we went into that first lockdown in the middle of March, we had, I would have to say, across the entire TG business, be hundreds of shows that were either postponed or cancelled. Some of them it was unavoidable to cancel them completely. Others that there was a opportunity to postpone them. And some of us postponed them to around this time, thinking that we'd be through it in 6 months. And of course, they've either been postponed again or cancelled outright. So, but we are just having to put our horizon in a different sort of place, I guess, and looking at international music, hopefully coming back, sometime later in 2021. And we've done a lot of work on domestic events, so domestic artists, domestic programming. And some of our family entertainment shows, which are experiential, whether it's exhibitions or I think called Pixar Putt, which is an outdoor sort of mini golf activation that are already COVID safe. So we're just having to try and adapt as much as we can. But the reality is, if we can't have mass gatherings, if you like, and we don't get international travel bans lifted, then there's going to be a lot of spinning of wheels for a significant amount of time, and that's we felt that a lot this year for sure.
But it is part of like those first couple of steps. So initiatives like Great Southern Nights, being able to have all of these COVID safe shows, to be able to have all of these people that haven't been in work, musicians and stage crew and all the people that put on events, like that's part of the both bringing the fans back because there's this appetite, and getting the musicians back because they want to be back working, but also to show government that these gigs can happen. They can happen indoors. They can happen outdoors. That's just part of the process to get you to what is, I guess, is termed COVID normal.
Yeah. And so we've got two the first two arena shows happening Saturday week and the Saturday after that at Kudos Bank Arena, which again has been dark since March of this year. And both will be reduced modes, about sort of 6,000 capacity, checkerboard seating, lots of COVID controls and measures in place to manage it. But it's not we're not doing it because it's going to be financially viable in even the short term, let alone the long term. It is about creating a bit of momentum and getting the optics onto music and large-scale indoor events to say these can be operated, safely and well, and that there's passion from fans to get back out there and see these shows. So looking forward to that, and again, also looking to see, how the Australian Open goes and how Test cricket goes and all those major sporting events.
One of the things that we have discussed on the Sports Biz Zoom calls is around, I guess, the stadium experience and ticketing in general, and the fact that COVID is accelerating, I guess, the innovation in ticketing. Like, we've been trying to move off the paper ticket and people having the paper ticket and moving to the digital ticket. COVID has, if it hasn't already, it should kill the paper ticket, because we don't want people touching things and those kind of things. So is there innovations in that space that have accelerated because one, it's required from a protocol point of view, but also it was on the list of things to do, but now COVID gives you a reason to push ahead with that type of technology?
Yeah, so, mobile ticketing has been around for a little while, but the take-up has been kind of, in bits and pieces, really. I mean, some people just love to get the hard ticket,
Yep.
But, we're in an environment now where even pulling out a note to give it to a vendor, is weird. Everyone just transactions. It's the same with ticketing. It's all going to be contained in your phone pretty much, and that's what will be implemented at most events. And there's obviously speed and efficiency and everything around that too, but there's also an element of knowing who is in the building, understanding, how to, if needed, to track and trace people if that's required. It's going to be part of the landscape for the foreseeable future, for sure.
And it definitely also helps from that ingress, outgress of a stadium, because that's going to be, more important and going to be a big part of event plans, as they start scaling up 25%, 50%, 75%. We don't know where it's going to be, but like how people get in and out of stadiums, how does wayfinding and signage and ticketing, like how does all that tech play together to make that a better overall experience for fans?
Yeah, you're right. It has multiple reasons for doing it, and getting people in the building more quickly, efficiently, and again, identifying, you've got a valid ticket holder who's coming in. All of that makes total sense. And so, maybe it is a bit of a jolt that the industry needed to make that happen, in a more sort of structured way. Certainly, the part of our business is Ticket Tech, and they've had this technology for a long time, but the take-up hasn't been as strong. Now it's going to be a prerequisite to operate a lot of events.
And do you think there's also going to be a potential change to the ticketing product, like what is offered to the fans? Whereas, we were all sitting in particular seats, and we're already starting to see stadiums sort of move to more open area, like bar areas where you can watch a game or watch a concert. Do you think there might be, VIP sections that won't be as packed, that have really good access, that are a higher premium ticket because you can move around, that come out of this, come out of 2020 as a different product?
Yeah, I think there will be some innovation in that space. I mean, I also think that, things are going to bounce back to what people have been used to in terms of event experience sooner than probably what some people are expecting. And that, I think, we're creatures of habit by and large, and we have, whether we're going and enjoying a game of footy or going and enjoying a concert, there's a particular way in which we've done that over a long period of time, and even this sort of hiatus period, and there'll be some, as I said, innovation which may make the experience a lot better. But I also see there'll be, a lot of back to how we used to enjoy footy and how we used to enjoy other sport and live entertainment, and people will be really happy for that to happen, a return to normalcy.
Oh, completely. But it's like, while you're in it, like thinking of things like, I don't go into mosh pits that much these days, but the idea in the current environment to be in that space, like that's the piece that is an education piece, and hopefully it's a vaccine or, Is it rapid testing? Like there's talk of, is there temperature checks as you're going into stadiums? That's still all up in the air. That has to, I guess, bring that patron comfort to be able to go, yes, I'm going to be able to be in that space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you say, I think as we are graduating up from, up to, 25, 50, 75%, that's you will see a lot of that. And you'll also see that the venues are trying to innovate around that in terms of that experience for how people can go and have food and beverages, how you can collect your merch, there have been aspects of that in other parts of the world, through whether it's, getting food delivered to your seat and getting your merch pack handed to you on your way out of the building. There's those sorts of things that have been happening to some extent. So there may be an acceleration as far as that's concerned, just due to the fact that people are wanting to have less necessarily interaction or less bottlenecks and less prepared to be queuing up for things. They want a way of doing things more efficiently. Yeah,
and I definitely think in this market, like talking to people in the US, they're championing, payless options where it's automatic. Like it's something that has been happening and quite well adopted here in Australia because it's an Australian invention, PayWave. So like we're very easy to adopt those kind of things. So, the click and collect, you're in your seat, you click the button and you walk out and grab your bag and you're not waiting there to buy things it makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about a couple of announcements. Talked about the Great Southern Nights, but announcement this week was Guns N' Roses coming to Australia and New Zealand in November. How do you organise and be a tour promoter like in the middle of a pandemic to plan out that horizon for next year? How is that different to what it would have been normally if you were planning that a year ago? What more I guess levers and clauses are in organising a tour like that?
So I don't think prior to 2020, many of us really took all that much notice of force majeure clauses. You knew they were there. You sort of knew what they meant, but you didn't spend a lot of time really, negotiating them or thinking about them. Gee, hasn't that changed? Yeah. Now they're the most important clause in the contract, and so some of them have been, massively bolstered to deal with the particular situation we're in at the moment, but also things that are analogous to it. So, with all artist agreements, with major rights holder agreements, with venue agreements, with most facets of how you put an event together now, that is baked into it, that there needs to be a position where neither party is unfairly exposed to the impacts, ongoing impacts or extended impacts of something like COVID-19. Now, there still is always a tension between the negotiating parties around that, but I have to say that by and large across the industry, people have been, really good about it, and that's people who have a lot at risk in coming all this way to Australia too, a lot of costs that they have to wear. And we're in an environment where obtaining insurance in relation to COVID specifically is impossible, but to, cancellation and contingency cover that we've normally had is eye-wateringly expensive. Now, that may ameliorate over time, and we're certainly talking to government about ways in which they can support the industry in this particular environment. But, it has meant that the concentration on clauses like that has been pretty significant.
But is there also the other piece of, again, touch wood, that Australia gets things right and fans and the restrictions start to lift and stadiums can get to a certain capacity? Like, is there like on your projections, a place where actually we've got full stadiums and this might be the only part of the world that can do events? Could we see like a raft of content and musicians going, I want to play to a crowd. I like, and if Australia and New Zealand is the place to come, like, is that opportunity if we head down the path of things get work well? Yeah,
well, look, we're definitely, I think, other than obviously what happened in Melbourne for a period of time there, but regarded as being a really good destination for events and artists, given what's going on in other parts of the world, which are pretty horrendous at the moment. So there is definitely that, and if there is going to be an extension of the pandemic, I guess that deep into the Northern Hemisphere summer, then the first opportunity that a number of these artists and sports might have will be our summer into the end of 2021 and through into 2022. So we may actually be their first real opportunity of getting back into what would be normal touring or normal operations. And they're very mindful of most conversations we have with those rights holders in the UK and the US. I mean, they're certainly looking at Australia with a lot of envy and a lot of interest in seeing if they can get down here. But yeah, there's a fair few steps in between, including obviously something which is not particularly attractive to anyone is the idea of having to quarantine for a period of time or to stay within Australia in a specific travel bubble and not do the normal things they have been able to do when they come to Australia, to interact with fans or go out to the hotels, the pubs, the clubs, the restaurants, the beaches, all of that. So this summer, for the whole series of sport that's coming down, it's going to be a completely different experience for those athletes, players, officials than they've had in Australia in the past. But they're grateful to have the opportunity to perform, to compete.
Before I wrap things up, the last time we did actually catch up and meet in person was at Melbourne Esports Open, where I was lucky enough to see Pabu on stage in a Gravitas jersey on Rod Laver Arena. It's obviously a new and developing space for TEG and in the partnership with ESL. Do you want to give us a bit of, insights in being in the space and why it's an exciting space for TEG?
Yeah, so, I think we developed a relationship with ESL a number of years ago now, knowing that it was obviously something that was emerging and it had largely been confined to smaller venues, smaller events. But we were seeing overseas the emergence of these mega events, and as we are going in and out of these large venues frequently, we thought it was a good opportunity to talk to ESL about developing mega events in Australia. So the Intel Extreme Masters in Sydney was the first kind of kickoff in 2017, and then creating the Melbourne Esports Open with ESL was sort of the next logical phase of that. So we're in it for the long haul. Obviously, we haven't been able to execute an event in 2020. We have noticed that esports has gone from strength to strength, gaming generally over during the COVID pandemic. And so we're very excited and confident that it's going to bounce back, hopefully 2021. We're looking at this stage like that should be a possibility. So we're working on that as a plan with our friends at ESL to get it back started in 2021. But yeah, we're very excited about the space, and in the sense that, unusual way in which they've been able to even deepen their the strength of whether it's the tournaments or the gaming, the games themselves. The future is really strong, we think. So we're very excited about that.
And that's the thing. Like, the thing that I loved about it is actually meeting the fans that have been watching online. Like, because they don't get that opportunity, which, as a sports fan in a year that's not 2020, you take it for granted that you're going to the games on a weekly basis. So when you get your one shot a year to go and see and mix and see people live in action and meet with friends, it's a real coming together, which is what we accept in sport. And so it's still relatively new in esports in this part of the world. But when you see it, the big events that happen in Europe and China and the US. Australia does big events really well, and I don't see any reason why we can't do the esports side of things as well. The same. I want to get to the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Yes. Now it must have been 1981. Hawthorn versus Melbourne at the MCG was the first experience taken by my grandfather, who was a mad Hawthorn supporter, and he managed to get me to barrack Hawthorn, which was of great disappointment.
You must have had a tough life as a Hawthorn supporter. 11 premierships. Tough. We haven't run a flag in a couple of years as a refrain for a Hawthorn supporter. You would have also seen, being in the events industry, that the food game has leveled up. But if you're looking back at 1981, how much the food game has leveled up from, humble pie and sauce, and I love my pie and sauce. But do you have a favourite? Do you have a go-to food or a favourite food memory at a sports event?
Yeah, look, it still is the humble meat. It's a 4 and 20 pie with sauce, the footy in the depths of July with the sleet and the rain coming down at the MCG. nothing beats that. You're freezing cold and you warm yourself up with a pie. That's the go, as it was in 1981 and still is now.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think absence makes the heart grow fonder. Like, that will definitely be the case when we all get to go to an event in 2021, if not before. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It would be Twitter. It'd be Twitter for sure. Given I've been an avid follower of the US election, but it's also pick up all the news, sport, all the updates. Twitter is the most efficient, and that would be the go-to.
Terrific. Is there someone that you follow, whether it be an author or a podcaster or someone you work with, that the podcast listeners should follow, and why?
So the one I've been listening to a lot is Sam Harris, Making Sense. So he's a philosopher, and that one was really brilliant. I highly recommend that. I'll give you another one, which is called The New Abnormal, which is US politics podcast by a guy by the name of Rick Wilson, who's a Republican strategist, and Molly Young-Fast, who's a left winger. So quite an interesting mix, but they have some incendiary.
Terrific. Last question. What social media platform is your MVP? And you can answer that personally, like what's your go-to platform, and then also maybe put your TEG hat on. What platform is helping you hopefully get those cheeks back in the seats? Yeah,
so look, Twitter's my favourite, but I think the one that's we're finding to be developing most effective is TikTok. It's where the kids are now discovering music. A lot of the musicians are putting little stings of their latest tracks on there to test it. So you get a really good read on, what young fans of music and sport even are interested in by now, I don't necessarily, watching a lot of TikTok, but our marketing team are all over it. It's really important to how we're developing our marketing strategies across,
in both identifying talent, how talent is pitched, who you're going to back shows from, like following those trends.
And how they're communicating. It's unbelievably efficient way of picking up what I guess your young, in particular young fans are gravitating to, what they're excited by, much more so now than a Facebook or an Instagram, or it really has become the platform that gives you a good read on what's happening.
And given it's, to dive in on the TikTok piece, given that it has grown so much this year, we actually haven't seen, I guess, the TikTok at events piece. Like, hey, I'm at a concert, or hey, we haven't seen that as much of that.
No.
And whether it is going to be that, because TikTok is this, I'm creating something. It's not the selfie Instagram, hey, this is where I am. So it's going to be interesting to see how those content creators remix the event experience, because it'll be a really great way for you as a promoter to go, oh, these are the TikTokers that are broadcasting, covering our event in a completely new way, because it's unlike anything else. It's not chronological. It's not turn on and go live, and it's all up to, I guess, the creator. Yeah,
short form, instantaneous, video gratification, if you like, or excitement and fun. And so some really incredible stuff that people are doing. There's also some absolute nonsense. So you get everything in between. But as I said, if you're sort of watching the right people and what they're creating, you can get a really good read. It certainly, again, helps us a lot in understanding our audiences.
Terrific. Before we wrap up, where can people find you on the internet if they want to connect with you and say hello, say they've listened to the podcast? What are the best platforms to connect with you?
What is the best? I'm on LinkedIn. I guess, I'm on Twitter, t.mcgr at Twitter, I think it is.
Tim MCGR, I've got it in front of me. On Twitter is your Twitter handle. That's terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to the pod. Hopefully the hurdles that we've had to go through technically have not subsided, and I hope to see you at an event in the near future.
Find out more about Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process at digitaltodollars.com. We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Tim McGregor, Tim MCGR on Twitter. Please send him a tweet. He does check his Twitter. Hopefully I will see him again and see you again at an event soon, perhaps at MEO 2021 with Gravitas on the main stage. He's hoping. One can dream, can't they? If you have listened to this episode and enjoyed the conversation, remember, I want to continue to work with Sports Geek podcast listeners. I love working with listeners, so book in. Either go to sportsgeekhq.com/work. If you can't remember that, go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Both of those work. Both of those will get in touch with me, or you can use the old-fashioned method, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Before I go, I want to discuss a new podcast, something new, more content. For those who haven't been paying attention to some of my socials and what I've been doing on LinkedIn and other platforms, I have kicked off a new gaming agency with a good friend of mine, Chris Derrick. It is called Play Media, and its offer is to help brands navigate the world of gaming, which includes the world of esports. And so we've had some success over the COVID period in helping brands navigate and decide how they should enter the world of gaming and what channels they should use. And so in an effort to tell more people about that, and there's still a large education process that's required to explain to brands and help them understand the world of gaming, esports, streaming, platforms such as Twitch, understanding the publishers like Riot Games and Blizzard. So we've launched, funnily enough, a podcast. Now, this podcast is a podcast on YouTube. I'm not going to get into the debate whether a podcast on YouTube is really a podcast. I'm calling it a podcast, and it has some visuals to it. So you can check that out. The first episode was dropped last week. We're going to be releasing them every Friday. You can check them out at weareplaymedia.com. And then subscribe on YouTube. I'd really would appreciate it. The first episode, amongst a few different segments, but the main body of the conversation was, why should brands get involved in gaming? And that brand could be your brand. It could be your team. Why should you be involved? So hopefully that should give you some more info on the world of gaming and esports. We're going to be doing that every week. I would love your feedback on that, both as a format and also your thoughts on the world of gaming and esports and how it is relevant to you as a marketer, whether it is in the world of sport or outside the world of sport. So that's it from me. As always, you can reach me via sportsgeekhq.com, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, or at Sean Callanan. Don't forget, I would love your support via Patreon, sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.